So welcome everybody to the very last session of our two-day Kids First. I hope you all had an opportunity to go to some of the really great sessions that we had. We had fabulous keynotes, and all of the presenters that I was able to listen to just did fabulous jobs. We had some really, really great sessions today. So I get the opportunity to introduce you to one of my librarians from the Southeast District. This is Erin Silva, and she is the Youth and Teen Services Librarian at North Liberty. Her job allows her to incorporate her passion for advocacy and inclusivity for kids and teens from all walks of life. She wears many hats at her library, and I have to say, I think North Liberty is one of the best libraries for that. They allow their folks to do what they're really good at and passionate about. I love the way that works there. She has also served in a variety of roles with the the Iowa Library Association. Outside of work, Erin helps run a nonprofit that delivers donated furniture and mattresses to those in need. So she is going to talk to us today about changing the behavior game. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks everybody for sitting in on this session. I know I really wanted to go to Caitlin's session about LGBTQA+, so thankfully I have a coworker in there that's taking notes. I have a lot of stuff to present to you today, so I'm going to get right to it. Becky's going to be monitoring the chat because I will get really distracted if I have the chat up. So just put your questions in there and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, so yes, changing the behavior game, building relationships and changing the culture of your library. And what did I do? There we go. Or how one terrible summer almost made me quit my job and rethink everything. All right. So in this session, we're going to learn a little bit about what the library was like at North Liberty prior to the summer of 2018. We're also going to cringe a little bit when I talk about what happened during the summer of 2018. It was not good. Then we're hopefully going to love what we learned from the United Action for Youth, working with a social worker, and some trauma-informed thinking, and then a little bit about what's next for our library. So prior to the summer of 2018 was basically like this. The Ice King was coming, but we didn't know. I started in May of 2016 after almost 6 years of working at the Kelowna Public Library. There's many differences between those two libraries. Size is one of them. Kelowna is very small and North Liberty is much larger and is growing like weeds. We also share a building with the rec center at North Liberty. So the rec center and communications for the city and the library were all in one building. Sharing a building with the rec center is great, but it also is kind of a challenge as we have different missions and philosophies. One of the biggest differences was the building policy. So prior to 2017, the building-wide policy was that kids under 11 or like 5th grade and under had to have an adult, a sibling, a guardian who was 16 years of age or older with them at all times. The library policy stated that kids under the age of 9 must have a parent or guardian with them at the library. So like that's fine for the rec center. It is more dangerous there. They have weight machines. There's an indoor pool. There's the outdoor pool. There's like a downstairs that kids, could go into if no one was watching them. So like, I get it, but it's not really fair for kids who want to use the library who may not have a parent with them. I'm not going to debate the merits of when a child is old enough to be in the library on their own, but I just want to say that, some kids are mature enough to handle being in the library without supervision, especially if like their siblings are at a swim lesson or at a basketball practice and they don't want to have to watch that, but their parents can't be in two places at once. So we worked on this policy, and in 2017, the library eliminated the age barrier. If a patron can follow the library conduct policy, they can stay, regardless of how old they are. Um, and while I think eliminating that age barrier is great, I don't think we thought all the way through about what that might mean. And what it ended up meaning is we had a core group of kids between the grades of like 2nd and 5th who were with us every day after school until we closed, and also a good majority of our weekend hours and into the summer, which was fine. But again, there's things that happen that we weren't really prepared for. So also in 2017, I began our after school snack program. There was 2 reasons for that, one of which was that I didn't really know who the kids were that were in the library all the time because I was still relatively new. And also, I recognized that a lot of these kids would come after school and they would stay until we close at 8 o'clock and they would not have anything to eat. And as we all know, hungry kids can be ornery kids. And I was trying to eliminate some of the behavioral issues that we were starting to see. So we continue the snack program to this day, but yes, this is basically my life. Okay, so summer of 2018 was not good. I will kind of give you a little background as to why we were not okay. The assistant youth and teen services librarian, Caroline, she left to take another job at the university. My coworker, Emily, who does our family services programming, so 5 and under, all the story times, she was out on maternity leave. I was doing all of Emily's programming, plus all of the school age programming, plus all of the teen programming. I was trying to train the person that we hired at the end of June for Caroline's place. And then I also had a pinched nerve in my neck that I was on some medication for that made it just a little bit more of a challenge than what I would be like if I didn't have something kind of messing with my brain and being in pain. And so it was like this perfect storm. And then we had a family move into town, I think at the very beginning of June. And they were very disruptive. They would lie, they would steal things, they were loud. I'm sure some of you may have heard the adage that poverty is loud. It was very true for this family. The Hy-Vee was opening a new store in technically Coralville, but North Liberty claims it. And they were using our meeting room space to do job interviews and to hire people and to do some training. They always had food in the meeting rooms, and the kids in this family figured out the combinations for the keypad locks on the doors, and they would go in and steal the food. Mom would come in with her partner and very much not interested in doing what her kids, or were paying attention to what her kids were doing. The oldest daughter took a charger from the library, and when we confronted her about the fact that she was stealing it because she was in the process of leaving with it, Mom was not really at all bothered about that. And it was a lot. Mom called me a racist to my face in the middle of the library one afternoon after just like a small little conversation I had with one of her sons. Yeah, it was intense. So needless to say, library staff, we were unprepared, we were overwhelmed, and we were very, very reactive to this family. Nobody wanted to deal with them. Nobody on staff wanted to deal with them. Because I was the youth and teen person, I was the de facto person that got to try and handle all of this, and I was not handling things well. They were not just disruptive at the library, they were also disruptive at the rec center, the place where they lived, And at the free summer lunch program, they did get kicked out of that program for a week because of their behavior and language and things like that. So all of this was going on, and it was, so this quote, I'm not really into motivational quotes, but this is kind of exactly what we needed to happen here. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So we kind of had like a week to regroup after summer was over and school started. And we thought, okay, maybe we need to like have the library expectations written out for people so that they can see what we need to do while we're in the library. So we started and we created this poster of library expectations that we thought was great. And we spent like $100 to have 2 of them printed, and we were really excited about it. And it's full of no's. And is kind of judgy. I'm going to show you a picture here so you can see our poster of no's. Like the first one's fine, keep the library clean. Okay, great. But then it's no swearing, no physical contact, no gym behaviors, no disorderly groups. Definitely, although we were not shushing librarians, I feel like this is exactly the type of reactive behavior that doesn't always work. But we didn't really realize that at the time. So I was also brainstorming with my director, and we reached out to the United Action for Youth for some help. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that organization. They came in for a staff in service day and kind of changed our whole philosophy in how we deal with patrons. So it's important to note that in September, right before our UAY training, our problem family moved back to Kansas City, where they came from. It kind of left us in a lurch because we weren't sure if they were coming back or not. So it's like, you know, waiting for the other shoe to drop in how we were kind of interacting and walking around the library, a little bit on eggshells and a little bit nervous. But it was also a huge relief, I'm not going to lie. It allowed us to regroup as a team and move forward. So UAY is an organization in Iowa City that stands for the United Action for Youth, and they help teens and teen parents and teens who are transitioning out of homelessness. They have like a downtown hangout place where kids can create art and music and videos. They do parenting workshops with the teen parents. They offer childcare when those types of things are going on. And they also do training with different organizations. They helped us kind of look at like what lenses we look through when we are looking at the public, and also what lenses our patrons might look at look through when they are looking at us. And one of the main tenets of how everyone at UAY interacts with youth is unconditional positive regard. And that's really important. So it's accepting others as they are without judgment or evaluation. We do not know what is going on in anybody's home life. We have to accept them where they're at. We don't know how they were raised. We don't know anything. And it's really unfair to judge somebody when you don't know. Which is something that Kristen talked about earlier in the, dealing with angry parents and patrons with censorship issues. You got to accept them where they're at and move on. That sort of thinking takes time, and it's huge, but ultimately it's powerful and positive change. So some of the takeaways from the training for us as a staff included this notion of unconditional positive regard, that respect is not assumed, it's earned. Just because you're an adult does not mean that a kid has to respect you. You got to earn it, which we'll talk about later. And also kind of flipping the script. Instead of thinking things and saying things like, well, those kids should know better. They should know how to act. They should know they shouldn't swear in the library. Like, no, that's not the case. And it's our job to be more in line with, let me help you learn our rules, and not just assume that the way you were raised is the way that your patrons were raised. And that's a really important point, I think. So this training changed the way we thought about our patrons. Unfortunately, the rec center staff was not involved in this training, and it's kind of highlighted the schism between the two sides of the building a little bit. One side of our building, there's the thinking that it's a privilege to be able to come into the building and use the facilities. The other side of the building believes that being here is a thing that you can do by virtue of being a community member. I will let you figure out which side is which, but there's definitely a difference in philosophy, and we've had to work really hard to get on the same page as a building. One of the other things that UAY helped us do was think about our space and our teen zone, as it's called. It's a walled off room with glass. We can see inside. And it was very, very sterile. And so they kind of helped us figure out that maybe we needed to do something fun with our space. So I reached out to the local gallery in town that does like painting classes. They do art classes with kids, but then they do like wine and canvas night or whatever with adults. So 3 of their teens actually created this mural and spent last summer drawing it and then painting it, and that's what it looks like, and it's amazing, and I love it, and there's all kinds of things to see on it. So we're also working on getting different furniture because for some reason the teens don't think these purple chairs are comfortable. They're not terrible. I've sat in them, but they don't like them, but whatever. Things cost money and we have to wait. So they were very valuable in helping us. Okay, so after some training and research, I realized that the path the library is on was much more aligned with social work, and I'm not a social worker. I'm not going back to school because, oh my God, I don't think I could handle it. And so I thought, okay, let's work harder, not smarter, or smarter, not harder. And I contacted the School of Social Work at the University of Iowa because we're only like 20 minutes away from the university. I talked to the head of the department there, and she said, oh, that sounds like an amazing partnership. Why don't you come to our job fair and see if you get any interest from any of our students? And I was like, great. So I went in the spring of 2019 and met Kristen, she ended up being our social work practicum student, and it's really been one of the most satisfying partnerships I've ever had. She's amazing. So she started in August of 2019. I will be sharing my slides after I'm done with this presentation, and these are some links that you can check out. The socialworkguide.org has information about schools of social work. So, you may not be close to the University of Iowa or Iowa State, but I will tell you that there are actually 17 schools offering social work programs in Iowa. Of those schools, 2 offer associate's degrees or certificates, 14 offer bachelor's degrees, and 4 offer a master's or advanced degree. So even if you are, out in a place that's not close to a university or big college, you should check on this site to see which schools are closest to you, and reach out and ask if there's anybody that would want to do a partnership, because social work students have to complete some sort of practicum placement, and there is so much that they can do for you. I kind of thought that social workers and libraries mostly dealt with like homelessness issues, or drug issues and things like that. We don't have a homeless issue in our library because in North Liberty there's not really services for the homeless here. They tend to be in Iowa City, but there's like a million other things that they can do for you that you don't even know you need done. So it's really great. If you want to know more, the Whole Person Librarianship .com, that's another website. They have actually written a book. There's a whole chapter in there about social work students. And then this SW Library Interns, that's another site that you can see. They've got pinpoints on maps to show you where a lot of library interns, or I'm sorry, social work interns are working in libraries. So like I said, there's a lot of different ways that social workers can help you. Whether it's a student or even like a practicing social worker, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. Even if you were to ask like your local DHS office, I think that they would be able to connect you with somebody that way too. Web Junction is also doing a webinar on April 29th if you're interested in more about social work and library partnerships, and that is free. So, I think a lot of us are still closed on April 29th, so check it out. So some of the things that Kristen did for us outside of what her work with the kids is, which I will talk about, but she helped a librarian create surveys to identify the teen perceptions of the library and get their suggestions for programming. She helped us apply for some grants for, I think we got 2 new iPads and some other things. We already had kind of a partnership with the pantry. Our adult services librarian goes over to the pantry and does a pop-up library, but she helped to strengthen that relationship. She got library materials translated. She reached out to the ESL teachers at the elementary schools to see which language besides English was most prominent. And so we got some of our stuff translated into English and French. She brought in a speaker for our library and other city departments to discuss secondary trauma and what that means and how to care for yourself. And then as far as her work with the kids, she surveyed our staff on their perceptions and needs regarding working with the youth, summarized those findings, and then presented them to the staff. She used findings to create the staff training with me. I mentioned that in the previous slide. We did a role-playing scenario for staff with different situations that were really common in our library. And how to handle them so staff didn't feel like deer in headlights when they were confronted. It was really fun and super helpful. She talked to some other school counselors at a neighboring school district, and they shared with her what they were doing as far as social emotional learning, and also shared with her these brain breaks, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And then one other thing that she did for us was she set up a building-wide training about trauma for us with a social worker. And that is what we're going to talk about next. So trauma-informed practices. This information can be found at these 2 websites, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a breakdown about what we learned. So trauma is an event or series of events that is experienced by an individual that is harmful or life-threatening, and it can have lasting adverse effects. It can be little, like, your cat died, or, you had to put your dog to sleep, or it can be major, like community-wide shooting, or like 9/11, things like that. So it's the event, it's the experience of the event, and then the effect that it has on you as a person. And we realized that what we experienced collectively and individually during the summer of 2018 was trauma, and the staff was still having fallout from that, and it was important that we recognize that. So trauma causes physical, emotional, and social distress. It can, make people unable to control their emotions. They can be, not attentive. They might not be able to focus. They can become very protective of their personal space and personal items. I think this is something that we might experience in the library with some of our patrons, and especially kids. If you've ever asked them to leave their backpack at the desk, and they don't want to do that, it might be because they have had some sort of trauma, being moved around a lot in their life, and that's the only thing that they feel like they have control of is their backpack. And we have to be respectful of that. Fighting when criticized or teased, I think that's another thing that can happen in libraries a lot. Also unpredictable and or impulsive behavior. So some of these things sound like, well, yes, that's kids, but also there might be an underlying issue as to why kids and teens are acting that way. Trauma can be caused by a lot of different things. If you witness these things or experience any of these things, I think that neglect, abuse, bullying, poverty and hunger is huge in Iowa, and also racism, amongst these other things. I think those are probably what our kids deal with the most. You may have heard of ACEs. Those are adverse childhood experiences, and those are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood, so between the ages of 0 and 17. There's actually a quiz that you can take down here that can give you your score. Most of us will score at least a 1. I don't think any of us haven't had some sort of adverse childhood experience, but ACEs can be linked to chronic health problems, mental illness, substance misuse in adulthood. They can negatively impact your education and your job opportunities. Some of the questions have to do with violence, if you've ever been hit or if you've witnessed your mom or stepmom being abused, sexual abuse, neglect, if anyone in your family has committed suicide or attempted suicide, if anyone in your family has had a substance abuse problem or mental health problem, and then parental separation via divorce or jail. Those types of issues can lead to a higher ACEs score. But those impacts can be mitigated, which is where I think libraries come in. This is just an infographic about some of the things that can happen if you don't have a positive influence in your life to help mitigate some of these issues. So all of that information is important to think about when you are trying to build relationships through a trauma-informed approach. So a trauma-informed approach means recognizing that individuals who are or have experienced trauma are everywhere. They're not just in hospitals or mental clinics. They're the people who walk through your library door every single day. And there is a framework for a trauma-informed approach. And there are 6 principles that you can see on the screen here in how to reframe your policies and just the way that you conduct your business and approach people that are very, very helpful. So When you increase the focus on the impact of trauma and you recognize that trauma is a thing, you'll recognize how service systems and other community organizations are either contributing to trauma-related issues, which that just basically means if you're contributing to like re-traumatizing a victim, or if you're part of the healing process. And I'd like for us to all be part of the healing process. Organizations are beginning to revisit how they conduct their business using a trauma-informed approach. I don't know how many of you have access to HBO, but there's a documentary on there right now that's called Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops. And they are two officers in San Antonio, Texas, that they have completely redesigned how the San Antonio police deal with people that have mental illness. And they use trauma-informed practices, and they also are training other police departments to think about things in a different way instead of escalating violence and re-traumatizing victims. They are really working hard to use these principles to make their society better. It's really fascinating. If you have a chance, you should watch it. There's many benefits if you restructure your thinking based on these trauma-informed approaches. It helps people who have experienced trauma, and it helps the organization work more effectively with survivors of trauma. So what does that look like? These are some examples of the 6 principles. What I like to use as an example is, think about your policies. If you're a library that collects fines and you have a patron who comes in who can't pay, well, is your fine policy somewhere that can be easily seen in the library or easily viewed on your website? Is there a way for your patron to have a voice and a choice in paying off that fine? Do you just shun them completely until they can pay the whole amount at once, or do you let them have a choice in how they can pay off that fine? Giving them like some collaborative authority is really helpful. And then also that works within your staff as well. If you are in a place that is very top down and the director makes the decisions and you got to just fall in line, that doesn't always work as well as helping to share the power in decision making. So if there's any directors out there listening, please keep that in mind. It might go over really well with your staff. And also recognizing that people are not just one thing, and that's what intersectionality means. I'm a librarian, but I'm also a woman, I'm a white woman, I'm a cisgendered woman, I'm not religious. Recognizing all of those things helps people fight discrimination and oppression. It's kind of a heavy topic, intersectionality, but just boils down to recognizing that we're all not just one thing. Okay, so what do we do to build relationships in order to have a successful library in light of all of this? Had I been prepared in my librarian toolkit with this information during the summer of 2018, I think things would have gone a lot better. But now I'm here to share with you some things that we do in light of all of that. So there's a lot of practical tips. One of them, getting to know the kids. Building positive relationships is the most effective way to prevent problematic behaviors and encourage positive behavior. Smile, look happy to see them when they come in. Learn their names, which we have a trick for that. Hobbies, what they're interested in, anything about them. Ask them how they are. When you first start to do this, if you don't know the kids and if you don't work with kids normally, it's going to feel weird and it's going to be awkward. They don't know you, you don't know them. They're going to be like, whatever, weirdo. But keep trying, persevere, and eventually you will wear them down and they will come around. And, you know, even if they can't say it, kids need an adult in their life who cares about them, and you may be that adult. Catch kids being good. This is something my former mother-in-law used to tell me all the time about my son. Like, if he's doing the right thing, praise him. You know, if the kids are following the rules, keeping noise levels at appropriate, you know, decibels, tell them. Be like, hey, Becky, thanks so much for walking in the library. That's so great. Like, thank you for modeling great behavior. You want to talk and behave calmly and politely to kids if they are, especially if they're not being nice to you. You got to be the adult. It's really easy to, you know, be snarky and kind of cut them down if they are being that way to you, especially tweens. They're real good at that. But you got to be the adult and model the appropriate behavior, because they may not be getting that at home. Be specific. If there's a behavior that you want to stop, yelling over a group of kids and saying, stop it, it's really confusing. Instead, you need to say the specific problematic behavior and then the specific behavior you want to see. So if there's a kid who's running in the library, be like, hey, Stephanie, stop running, walk, please. And then if there seems to be issues between or among the kids, you know, step in and be like, hey guys, it sounds like you are, you know, getting on each other's nerves. How can we fix this? That way they are being given agency and a voice, and they are coming up with some problem solving in how to fix their own behavior. And it shows them that you care and that you are going to get involved but not dictate to them. Get on their level. It's really intimidating if somebody is standing over you trying to tell you what to do. So sit down, you know, face to face. That's a good way to even out the playing field. Remember that it's not about you. Problematic behaviors are not personal, just like book challenges are not personal. There are many reasons why a kiddo might be struggling. They could have had a bad day at school. They could have left their, you know, PE shoes at school, and their mom's going to get mad if they didn't bring them home. They are hungry. They might have ADHD. There's a million reasons why kids might be acting out that have nothing to do with you. So just remember that. Also, it isn't about you, part two. Just because a certain behavior is annoying you doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to stop. I hate whistling. Oh my Lord, I can't, it drives me crazy. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's driving anybody else crazy. So I kind of look around the space and see what other patrons look like they're feeling and kind of go from there. 9 times out of 10, it's just me and I need to let it go. So working to earn the respect. Again, that goes back to what the UAY helped us realize, that kids don't have to automatically respect you just because you're an adult. Most of them have had experiences with adults who have let them down. So why should you be any different? That's the lens that they might be coming from. And so, you know, you have to earn it. It's a two-way street. And also remember that kids' brains are different than adults. Prefrontal cortex with your decision making and emotional regulation doesn't fully form until you're 25. So kids can't predict consequences necessarily. They can't always understand someone else's point of view. They can't always control their emotions and behaviors as well as adults. And quite frankly, there's so many adults out there that can't do those things either. So we're all struggling, and we all just need to keep that in mind. So, yes, why would you do the thing I just said not to do? Kids are really good at doing this. So we have a behavior flow chart that we have that is accessible to staff at all times. I know this is a terrible copy of it, but I will have it linked in the presentation materials. But basically, these are the steps that we use when we have to intervene with a group of kids. This one talks specifically about kids who are loud. So, you want to go over there, you want to smile and be like, hey, it sounds like everyone is having so much fun. What's going on? Tell me about it. Give them a chance to tell you. And then you can go in and be like, hey, that sounds awesome and so much fun. But unfortunately, like, it's a little loud. So do you think you can keep your voices down? And then the flow chart kind of goes through like what happens if they comply and then what happens if they don't. Kind of after the third time, we're like, hey, it just seems like you have maybe too much energy for the library today. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave for the day. But, I really want you to come back tomorrow. So take a few minutes to get your things and say goodbye to your friends, and we'll see you tomorrow. And then the most important part about that is to follow up with them the next time you see them. And whether that's you or another staff member, it just needs to happen. We kind of, we encourage the staff here to say, like, oh, hey, I had to kick, Rachel out yesterday because she was way too loud and was running and just wouldn't listen. I'm not going to be here tonight, but if you see her, can you follow up with her? So that way staff is making the connection and they're reestablishing that relationship, and you can, say something like, hey, I'm so glad that you're back today. How are you? Give them time to talk to you. And then you can say, yesterday, I'm sorry that I had to ask you to leave, or, Emily told me that she had to ask you to leave. Do you remember why you had to leave? And then see if they can recall, and then just be like, yeah, it was really hard to, keep your voice down. So, let's try to make it a little lower today, or something along those lines, that will help reestablish that connection, and continue to build that relationship with them. And then you're also reminding them about your expectations. So how are the ways that we get to know the kids? Well, one of the things we do is a question of the week every week. Kayla or I, usually Kayla, has a question that the kids can answer. We use die cuts. They put their answer on the die cut with their name. So then we learn their name, how to spell it, how to pronounce it, and then they get a piece of candy. Yes, they just want the candy most of the time, but it does open the door for some funny conversations, and things like that. And it's been really, really effective in learning names. I'm a big fan of the question of the week. We also use these mindfulness activities. I was saying earlier how Kristen had met with the counselors at the other school district, and these are what they use in their classrooms, and they're just little brain breaks. They take like 5 minutes. It's just a way to help kids focus on what's happening in the moment and get them to calm down. We're trying to use these at the beginning of our programs with kids so they get used to seeing these and knowing what they are. We have 2 sets of cards that are easily accessible. These are also really great for, if you have a kid who's just, you can tell they're just not going to listen to you or whatever. Any staff can pull one of these cards and have the kid pick one, kind of bring them off to the side, have them pick the card and then do the activity. And then that gets them a way to reset, and then you can talk to them about their behavior. Nobody likes being called out in a group, so anytime you can take them to the side is great. I would never do these with teens. Let's be real. They would look at you like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm not going to do that. These work much better with elementary school age kids. And also I wouldn't use them with a kid who I don't know at all. So like I said, we're trying to get these as part of a routine with our weekly program so that they don't find them so off-putting if we happen to use them with them. Let's see, how else do we build relationships and trust? Oh, yes, okay, so we call these our star boards. In the back room, we have poster boards of our regular kids. So this picture is of our regular school-age kids that come in every day for the most part, definitely on weekends and definitely during the summer. We have a Polaroid camera, so we took their pictures and then we had them write their names out, and then I've gone through and placed them with their siblings. I have written down who their siblings are. If they have an older teen that also comes into the library, that information is written down. This is a way for all staff to familiarize themselves with the kids that they may not know. They will learn their names, and it's a really helpful thing. One of the things that UAY suggested was then going back and like staff putting their initials by a kid who they seem to really have a good relationship with. So like if you were really good at working with London, and London was having a problem and she wasn't going to listen to me, I could go and look and say, okay, Kayla is really good with London, so I'm going to see if she can step in and help. And that way, staff can feel confident in dealing with the kids, because, our part-time staff especially, sometimes they just need a little extra support. So we also have one for the teens. And again, I've put on there who they're related to, and with the little kids, if they are siblings, and that sort of thing. It's really effective. It's great because, in the middle of summer, we'll probably take their pictures over again because, kids change. And I love it. I think it's a pretty powerful tool. And then remember back when I was talking about some of the effects of trauma and being really protective of your personal space and your personal items? Well, we tend to have, basketballs brought down from the gym into the library. Not something that we really want in the library is bouncing balls and balls being thrown. And so rather than going over and taking the ball away from a kid, we have this ball deposit box that one of our volunteers decorated for us. And we asked them to put the ball in the box. And we have tape with a Sharpie, and they put their names on it. And then when they leave the library, they can grab the ball, take it with them. That way they are having some ownership over giving up their stuff. They know that it's going to be in a safe place and nobody's going to steal it. And it works really well. Because I'm sorry, like, who amongst us cannot bounce a ball if it is in our hands? It's impossible. So this helps them, behave in a way that is not threatening. And a lot of them are habituated now, so that they come in and they just give it to us without us having to ask. Not always, but, a majority of the time. So again, it's another way to get to learn their names if you don't know them, because they have to write them down. Another outcome that we have after working with the UAY and with our social work student is that we have an intervention program now where we can divert suspension or lessen the time of a suspension for an infraction. So like fighting or like slapping or something like that. The kiddo can meet with a UAY worker, and they will learn how to improve their communication, and they'll work on their conflict resolution skills. There's restorative conversations that happen, and also restorative actions. That gives the kid ownership of the space and the relationships that they have in the space. They have to meet with the UAY representative 3 times, and then they have to meet with certain members of the building staff. So myself, the rec center director, and maybe the library director and somebody else. And they have to kind of talk about what they learned, and then who they might feel comfortable with seeking out if, they find themselves in a situation. So like they would know that, if Brian was having a day, he could come find me, and I would know to maybe keep an extra eye on things, or, just help him talk through it. We've had one kid go through it so far. He was 14 at the time the rec center decided that he was no longer allowed in the building until he was 18, which seemed a little extreme to me, but we worked on it, and now he gets to come back in, and he knows that I'm a safe person, and he's got a contact person down at the rec center, and so far so good. And that happened over the summer. They're also going to work with us to do some sort of podcast with some of the teens about what it means to be a young person in Johnson County. Of course, we started that on Thursdays. We have early outs, and they, like a UAY staff person, would come in and kind of hang out with the kids, and starting to get to know them that way. And then COVID happened, and so now I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I hope to see it continue. Some of the other things besides the mindfulness cards and activities that we're trying to develop, social emotional learning is kind of a buzzword right now. I'm going to a yoga conference in a couple weeks, and there's a program that I'm particularly interested in learning about, and it's, being able to work with underserved teens and how to strengthen their self-esteem and their worth from within. And so, we're probably going to do some more yoga programs. And then we're also developing our tween advocate group. We've tried for so long to get the teen advocate group to go, and it's not going. It's dead, friends. I don't know. It's not working. But we've got this really good group of tweens, and so we've been working with them once a month to kind of get them to help us plan activities, and that's been going really well. And then while we're closed, we've been doing a diversity audit. Oh, thank you, Cedar Rapids Public Library, Molly, if you're listening. It's been awesome. We want to make sure that we started with our young adult collection, and we want to make sure that it reflects what our patrons want and need. And that's also been going really well. So that's kind of where we're headed. Okay, and these are just some pictures of some of our regular kids. They love iPads, they love Roblox, and they love snack. I just want to point out, this is our friend London. She started coming to the library just about when she was 4 years old, not quite. She comes with her cousins. She's 5 now, but she's definitely was one of our younger ones. But you know what? She can follow the rules. She can behave. She can entertain herself for the most part. Very rarely do we have to call grandma to get her, to come pick her up. And, it works out really well. So, okay, I did it. That's all I have. What questions do we have, Becky? Anything?
All right. Thank you. You did. That was perfect timing. We have about 7 minutes left for questions. Let me pull them up here really quick. I think I will take them a little bit out of order. Let's do some short ones first so that we can get some of those in. Let's see. All right, so how do you balance these interventions with different behaviors? If one group is talking loudly, you say something and they stop talking loudly, but now they're running. Is it still a first warning, or what kind of a process do you use for that?
So it's definitely, hey guys, let's regroup. Let's talk about library expectations. Respect yourself, respect the space, respect the people in the space. It's not really respectful to be running in the library or having your voice too loud. So the 3 strikes is a little bit gray, but definitely if they've been really loud and been warned and now they're running and like they've, then they get to be a little bit more on thin edge or thin ice, I guess. And usually it's like, hey, why don't you take a lap outside if you need to run, and then you can come back in. So give them a choice.
Good idea. I like that. Then how much time do you give kids to adjust their behavior before you go back to them that second time? Somebody's talking about a staff that says, go right back to them right away before they even really have a chance to self-regulate.
I mean, I give them like 5 to 10 minutes before I go back if I'm not already over there. We try to have staff in the kids area during like the really high traffic times. That doesn't always work. Sometimes we have to go over there from the front desk. So, but yeah, I mean, give them at least 5 minutes or so. It's hard to calm down.
Yeah. All right, and then we had a couple of questions and comments that came through about taking the pictures. One is, do they always say yes? How do you approach them when you ask them to take their picture? And then did you have a discussion about how, if that's appropriate or not, having those pictures, even in the back room, is that kind of an invasion of privacy?
So we always ask the kids. And like I said, I guess I didn't say, the kids love to have their pictures taken. And they're like, what are you going to do with them? Where are you going to put them? Well, it's just for the staff. Nobody's going to see them except the staff. And it's so that the staff can help learn your names. And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I think we had one teen who was like, no, don't take my picture. And so we didn't. It's not, we didn't make it a big deal. And they were fine with it. So it really wasn't an issue. And again, we were very explicit. The slides that I showed that had the kids in them, I asked them if I could take their pictures, and then they, well, what are you going to use it for? And I was like, well, I have to do a presentation about, what you guys do and how we work with you in the library. Is that okay? Like, oh yeah, that's fine. They don't seem to care. And honestly, I'm not worried about their adults because their adults aren't really people that I've ever seen in the library. So, I'm going to cross that bridge if I have to.
Good. All right. Thanks. All right. So now we've got some ways to handle this with kids. What about those adults who are acting like kids? Do you use these same kind of techniques with adults that are misbehaving?
So a little bit different. Definitely asking them to come to the back if they, when one is confronted in front of other people in the library and told they are racist, maybe bring that person into the back into like the director's office and sit down and like, please, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way, or I'm sorry that I said something that would make you think that I am racist. Let's talk about it. I don't use the same tactics with adults all the time because they're adults and you hope that they will get it a little bit better. But, if you can pull them to the side, if they're with another group, you just have to take a big breath and be like, hey, it's a little loud. We've had like our seniors meet on Mondays for like their coffee group. And Jenny, the director, has had to go over there and tell them that they were too loud. They needed to be quiet. So, it's, I'm less afraid of adults than I am of kids. Isn't that funny?
That's interesting. That's cool. Just a couple of things. Maybe I'll finish up with the other ones. One last question that came in very early on, and I think you really kind of answered it. But before you kind of got into some of the ways that you're changing things, the question came through: how do you think you would handle your challenging family if they came to the library now? What are some of the steps that you would take?
Definitely would have sat the kids down and gotten to know, like, hey, where'd you guys move from? Tell me about what it was like in Kansas City. I'm from Kansas City, so like I felt like we could have had a really good connection talking to them, and also being a little bit more, this sounds a little antithetical to what I was saying before, but being more strict and really letting them know the rules and not and communicating with the staff. So when we switch desk shifts, really letting the next person on staff know, like, this is what's happening. This is, this is what we've done already. And then really sitting down with mom and boyfriend and being like, hey, this is what goes on at this library. We need your help. What's the best way to communicate with your kids? That's, number one, what I would have done. I did make a breakthrough with mom right before they left, and then I was really sad because they ended up leaving. But I do still have her phone number tacked to my my like bulletin board at my desk as a reminder of like how to do things better. We did have mom's cell phone, and we did call her sometimes if we just couldn't get them to listen. But I definitely think having the conversations ahead of time would have been helpful. I do feel bad for those kids. I mean, their life was chaos, and I know that they'd been in and out of foster care, and I cannot imagine some of the things they've been through, and having a more sympathetic outlook for them instead of just that visceral like clenching whenever they came in would have been much healthier.
And it's unfortunate that they left. You guys now have a thing in place that you could have helped with this, and now they may go back to a community that doesn't have all the things that you have in place, and they're going to start all over again.
And I'm not saying that like this is a perfect solution. There's still those kids or teens that it's not going to work with, but we have to do the best we can.
Right. Well, I am going to close things out then really quickly here. I just want to say a huge thank you to you. Tons of great information, but I also saw this in the comments and I wrote it down as I was listening. I really want to say thanks for your honesty, especially in the beginning about talking about the things, and I'm sure we all saw the things that we do wrong in our libraries and in our own lives, and then really bringing in a lot of the advice. And the last comment that I'm going to share here came from somebody, but I truly agree with it. He said, North Liberty has such an elevated working philosophy. It's refreshing to see a different mindset about troubled youth in practice. Thanks for sharing.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah, and I like the in practice part because we've all been to sessions like this before, but the fact that you guys were able to actually do it and make it work, I think is really exceptional. So thank you very much.
Yes,
We really appreciate
thank you,
you being here.
everybody.